Hello, everybody, and Happy New Year. Happy 2022. Wow, can you believe it's 2022 already? That's crazy. I know everyone keeps saying that, but it is a truth, so therefore it keeps being said. Anyway, I'm Mike Yao with Savage Kingdoms role-playing game and Fire in the Head Productions. As you guys know, or may not know, it's these two core rule books. We're on the 3rd edition right now, also known as SK3, and that's the core rule book. This is the Savage East. I know you guys have seen all this stuff before, but hey, I just wanna hawk my wares, right? That was the back. I don't know. Here's the back of that one. This is the Savage East, the companion book to the core rule book. It's not being technically a core rule book because all the core rules are in the initial book, which is the what is called the core rule book. But the Savage East does cover more Eastern cultures of the known world of Savage Kingdoms, the continents of Hassan and Amanju, and Ragnagard and Mezca, etc., and adds more talents and weaknesses and skill uses and spells and more elite orders and that sort of thing. So there you go. So anyway, this video is not necessarily about those per se, but it is about the game system and about going forward with Savage Kingdoms and Fire in the Head Productions. So I'm filming this. I meant to do this yesterday, January 1st, the actual first day of the new year, but this is the second when I'm filming this. So I'll have it posted probably later or tomorrow or something. I don't edit these things anyway, so it's not like a big deal. Just wanted to kind of talk about what's coming forward. So, couple things. So I made a post on the Savage Kingdoms company Facebook page. Haven't really done anything with a website in months. Should probably post something there. Um, um, and also the Savage Kingdoms Insider page. Some of my friends and playtesters that are in that group probably know what I'm talking about. But anyway, it was about going forward with the game system and trying to figure out what to do to make it a little more accessible and more popular. It's a very small game in the vast ocean of tabletop role-playing games, but it doesn't mean it's a bad game. In fact, that's why I keep putting out these editions. It's been 3 editions over the last 7 years. If I didn't believe in it, I wouldn't still keep doing it. And I'm one of those type. I mean, I have a few close friends that kind of know me well, but honestly, a lot of people don't really know me that well. Um, and that's fine. That's mostly kind of for a reason. Or they see me on stage as an actor or something like that, and they just like, oh, that's that guy, and he plays all these different characters or whatever. But the real Mike, just really quick, I'm actually not typically a person who would stick with something if I didn't believe in it. So I would very quickly have abandoned the Savage Kingdoms game system and have almost a couple times just to kind of start doing other things. And I do other game design things on the side. I have the Mythic West, which is a Old West sort of semi-alternate history. It uses actual history, but you can make it do different things. Like if you set it in 1872, which is where I've set the playtest, it doesn't necessarily have to follow what happened in the events of 1873. Or maybe you hit all the main events that we know about, and then you fill in all this other stuff that nobody knows about, and that's your adventures, whatever you want to do with it. So, and that has kind of a mystical quality to it, which is why it's called Mythic West for 2 reasons. One is kind of mythic in the sense of mythological and mystic, and then 2, mythic meaning that it can be alternate history. It can be a mythological sort of history of the Old West here in the United States. So that has been on the back burner. Not really the back burner. I mean, I've got playtest rules of it already out, and we run about 3 sessions of it, I think. People seem to kind of like it. I'm more of a medieval fantasy guy, as most people would know, much more than a science fiction guy or even an Old West guy. I actually might even prefer Old West over sci-fi. I don't know. I do like sci-fi though. Speaking of which, I do have the Savage Stars system, which some of my kid players, my Savage Youth, as I like to call them, they have played some of it. I think I ran 1 session for adults, and then for some reason we just didn't really go any forward that, but it seemed like it was okay for what I had designed. So I do have that kind of stuff going on the side, in addition to my other jobs as an actor, as well as a a tour guide. I work as a tour guide as well, which is a good job for an actor. You're used to kind of performing and talking to people and projecting and all that kind of stuff and memorizing scripts really and facts and that kind of things. So all that's kind of related. Um, so yeah, so in addition to all that stuff, game creator or game designer is really kind of probably tertiary for me. However, it's a really long ways to set up what I'm about to say. Try to figure out some ways to kind of make SK more visible. And I would say Fire and Head Productions more visible. What I'm doing with that, with Fire and Head Productions, for those of you not in the know, um, it is my game design company primarily, but secondarily, I'm also starting to produce live theater with that, and I'm looking at doing maybe a couple more productions the coming year. Um, I just did produced It's a Wonderful Life, a live radio show down here in Western North Carolina in the beautiful mountains. That was produced at Black Mountain Center for the Arts. Um, Shout out to a couple of my cast members that are Savage Kingdoms players as well. So it's kind of interesting the streams cross from both sides of Fire and Head Productions. So a couple people, Matt and Madison, I'll go ahead and shout them out. I don't know if they ever watch these or not, but they were by George Bailey and Mary Bailey actually in the the characters portraying those characters in the live radio show. Long story. Also, very avid Savage Kingdoms players as well, which is really cool. So shout out to them, and shout out to all my playtesters from the past that have been with me for the last 7 years. Some of those people like Larry and Matt, and another Matt. Um, go way back on pretty much to the beginning, or at least like right at the end of the beginning, if that makes any sense. Um, and my wife Karen, who have kind of been with me this whole time. She is not a tabletop gamer. She is a fellow actor, though, and she's does support what I do with this stuff. And then some of the people that have been very supportive that have come in somewhat more recently, such as Danny and Ian and Patrick and William and some of those awesome folk as well. The two Sarahs and Jason. And anyway, I can't, if I forgot your name, just forgive me, but not a lot of people watch these things anyway. So back to the point. And on that point, trying to grow this whole more brand awareness. I will be trying to grow the YouTube channel some more. I've kind of gone in spurts of really trying to push the game and the YouTube channel and all this stuff, and it ends up by just not working, and I'm just like, screw it, whatever, I'm going to do something else. And then I'm like, again, I keep believing in this thing that I'm doing, and I'm like, certainly there's a way to do it. And I realize now that I'm getting older and more experienced and blah, 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 and a little bit more used to social media, the double-edged sword that it is, I'm starting to figure out what I'm missing. And so I'm now opening some doors and trying to figure out. So some of those things might be doing more live plays that we used to do. And they started off pretty well with a lot of likes, and then they just started fading. And then it causes me to look back at those and go, what are we doing wrong? Is like um, I'm known fairly as a fairly pretty decent game master with a lot of different character voices and storytelling techniques and all the stuff. And so then I look at it through the lens of like, am I not? What was my performance terrible there? I know it's just gaming and it's just kind of sort of boring watching people game to some people, but or is it my cast? Is it my cast isn't the other players? Um, or was it just a story, or was it whatever? So the truth is, it's probably all of those things to some minor degree. So maybe we're looking at going back to that. I even have a fellow a filmmaker in the area that I've done a couple of independent films with him as an act, or he's cast me as a couple of. This past one, actually, the major villain. Not to spoil it, so whenever it comes out, and there's some stuff in the past, and even though it's a small independent film, he's got some. He's really, really, really excellent. So shout out to Stefan if you watch this. His film company is really good. He's very talented himself. Uh, the stuff he produces, honestly, is like high level stuff, so that you would see on any kind of big network or whatever. Honestly, he may not even know that, but he definitely he's definitely up there. So anyway, what was I getting at? Oh yeah, so I've been talking possibly with him and possibly some others about possibly even a Twitch show on a Twitch channel, Savage Kingdom show, something to kind of get more brand awareness out there, and also uh, we have several people in there that are very talented actors and gamers, and I like to kind of uh, portray them in some of these shows with some of their sort of acting, some particularly voice acting abilities and that sort of thing, and storytelling abilities, improv technique, and that kind of stuff. That all of that, all those little subtle things that add together and make a thing enjoyable, other than people pushing back and being quiet and not really getting into character and laughing and stuff every 5 minutes. So. Um, I realize that could be a lot of fun, but honestly, when you look at some of those live plays and people that are just not very engaging with the camera and they're not really, you can't watch it more than 2 or 3 minutes. So I'm looking at a way to possibly do a Savage Kingdoms show, uh, whether it's Twitch or just more stuff on YouTube or whatever. Um, the other thing we're looking at is maybe the website. I've let the website savagekingdoms.net, by the way, kind of go. I think I still have the domain. I'm not even. I assume I haven't received any information to the contrary, but I have not updated that website in 9, 10 months, maybe a year even. Then again, what is time lately, right? What is time been the last 2 years? So trying to figure that out. Instead of doing it myself, maybe I turn it over to someone who actually knows what they're doing. But then that's more money, and this whole thing isn't really generating a lot of money at all. I make probably 5% of my living off of Savage Kingdoms, Fire in the Head Productions. Well, actually, Fire in the Head Productions probably would be the from theater would probably I probably made more in It's a Wonderful Life than the last 12 months last year of like book sales for the game. So just to put it in perspective there. Um, so it's not a lot. Speaking of which, so the big elephant in the room, I guess the big 800-pound elephant in the room is D&D Fifth Edition, which I have a love-hate relationship with. Mostly love. I say mostly love because I'm a professional game master as well as game designer, meaning that I run a lot of I run RPG camps in the area. I just ran one last week for the winter camp here for the kids in Western North Carolina in between New Year's, their winter break right after Christmas, and that went really well. And I usually do a couple during the summer. I'm even looking at doing one this for the spring break coming up. And I've done this for the last like 3 years or 3.5 years. Always sell out. They're always a big hit. Um, and I do run Savage Kingdoms for the kids, but it's mostly D&D 5 just because of brand awareness. That's some of those kids coming into the hobby, which is awesome. Bless them. That's really all they're aware of. And then I host these camps and these. I also run games on Saturday for kids. I have like 8 kids in the group now. I said I was going to cap it at 6, and now I've let 7 and then 8 kind of come in. Now one kid's kind of in and out, so that's why I sort of allow him. But anyway, it works. They have a great time. But anyway, so this local game shop hosts these camps and these sessions that I professionally run for kids. And then during our breaks, they'll go down, or when they go use the bathroom downstairs, the gaming is upstairs. They'll see all these new products, including Savage Kingdoms, on the shelves. Pathfinder and Savage Kingdoms, it's Fiasco, which is not technically tabletop role playing, but it is heavy improv and storytelling. Um, Dungeon World, Dungeon Crawl Classics, all this stuff. So anyway, point is, I see all these different games down, and they become aware that hey, there's more to it than just the D&D Fifth Edition, which is great. So having said all of that, how do I grow SK to that level? And of course, the honest answer is never going to be that level. It's no game ever will beat the level of D&D. Pathfinder got really close, and I guess to some degree sort of succeeded a few years ago during the dark days of Fourth Edition. We don't talk about that, although I just did. Um, but D&D Fifth Edition took the crown back pretty readily. So SK will never be to that level, certainly, but it doesn't need to be that level. Just maybe a little more brand awareness, um, just to try to get the game out there. I believe in it. It's not even necessarily a money thing. I would like to make a little bit more coin at this, but it's really not my main. My main livelihood is acting and working as a tour guide, honestly. Or in some of the professional GMing stuff. But again, most of that's D&D Fifth Edition. At the camps, I might run one day of SK, and they love it. Most of the kids, actually, the great majority of them do. Particularly the older kids, because SK Savage Kingdoms is designed. It is a little grittier, a little darker, and I run it lighter. Obviously, when I run it for for a 9, 10, 11-year-old or whatever. Some of the Savage Youth kids are now 15. I think one just turned 16. Another kid's almost 16. I can get a little edgier with them. I still don't want to go too hardcore. We have this thing nowadays. I should do a channel where I talk about other things uh, that we assume kids are they know more somehow from the internet, which is totally not true because there's a lot of misinformation, and wisdom also is a thing you can't really teach the internet. That's life experience. It's near here or there. But we assume that kids are darker and more used to horrible things, and that's not necessarily true. Maybe to some small degree. So having that said, on a light side note, sidebar, I do sort of pull punches a little bit with the kids, but once they start getting up there a little bit, SK was designed really technically. I think I put ages 14 and up on the back. Actually, it's SK3. I actually left that off in the previous editions. I put recommended for ages 14 and up. I just kind of left that off this time because very few people uh, really pay attention to that kind of stuff. And occasionally you'll find a 13, 14-year-old who's good with even at least 80% of the semi-dark stuff of SK. So you never really know actually, and or maybe it's not necessarily dark stuff. Another thing, the age thing is SK is, and I've described this before. It is like the simplest complex system. I wouldn't say ever, because there's certainly a lot of other games that do a better job. But when I describe Savage, and almost everybody else says the same thing. They're like, it's easier than D&D, but yet it's not. And I think what they're saying is, and this is, I don't know if this was a design goal specifically when I was designing it, but the fact that it uses a single D20 for everything, that's simple. A lot of my kid players get kind of a little, especially if they're new, they get a little confused with all their different dice, kind of slows the game down, and sometimes they get actually kind of frustrated. So just worrying about a D20 all the time is perfect. But it is a little more robust of a system. You can create a lot more varied characters, which is both a good thing, mostly a good thing, but also can be a hindrance, which means that there's a lot of choices, and a lot of people suffer from, particularly nowadays where we're inundated with all these different options and choices. Uh, there's option paralysis or decision paralysis can kick in. So there's a little bit of system mastery with Savage Kingdoms, I realize, but so there is with D&D Fifth Edition as well. D&D 5e does tout itself as like the gateway drug, as it were, the entry level to tabletop role playing, and that is true to mostly a degree. I mean, like I said, I run that for kids. I see it firsthand almost every day. But it's not as easy as some people might assume. So there is a lot of system mastery with D&D 5e as well. What is the point to all of that? I'm not entirely sure. But the original point was that I'm spitballing here about how to create more brand awareness, what to bring into 2022 with Savage Kingdoms. I would appreciate your help. So put comments down on the thingy down below, or go to the Facebook page and post a message or send me a message or something. So if you have any cool ideas, if you're good at marketing, and I know some of the stuff I'm going to get already is like how you need to hire some social media people. That's probably true. A lot of it's kind of expensive though. But I probably should. I mean, I take care of that myself, and I'm okay at it. I've had some promotional experience in the past, but not to the level. And then some social, like Twitter, oh my God, I just abhor Twitter, honestly, like a lot of us do. It's just such a cesspool now. But I feel like if you are just present as a product and just keep your nose out of all the other crap that's going on there, it's probably fine. So I probably just need to do that. I do have a Twitter account for Savage Kingdoms, but I rarely post, and there's all of like, I don't know, 5 people that follow or something like that. So maybe pump that up a little bit more. Instagram probably needs to be definitely pumped up a little bit. There's oh my God forbid TikTok, but apparently that's that's the future. Um, so Facebook's where I feel the most comfortable at, but I guess that is now kind of the old people's social media. There's Discord, but a lot of the kids like, and even gamers like, and haven't really been that impressed with Discord, honestly. And I feel like even Discord is kind of falling away. I don't really see a lot of activity with certainly not my channels, but even the channels that I'm involved with, even those have kind of fallen away. So yeah, so shoot me some ideas about what I can do there. Future products. So I'm working on. We're looking at. So I just showed you the two main books, right, of Savage Games Third Edition. So I'm currently kind of working. I keep going back and forth. So not to tip my hand too much. So I'm currently working on a novel, Savage Kingdom's novel, but at the same time, I'm working with the next game book for the Savage Kingdoms role playing game, and that will be. So I'm not sure which one I'm going to release. I keep kind of going back and forth. On one hand, it's really cool. I've kind of taught myself this method where I work on a couple things at once. That way, I work really hard on something. I get a little burned out, and I'm like, cool. And I switch to the next one, burn out, next one. And that's actually kind of a technique that's kind of worked out for me over the last few years, maybe even like a decade or so. So I'm kind of doing that. But I feel like I may start focusing on just one of those at this point. Now that I have both a little bit kind of done the foundations, I can now kind of maybe finish one of them. So probably it's going to be the supplemental book. I was leaning towards the novel like 2 or 3 weeks ago, but now I'm leaning back towards the game line book, just because I feel like maybe a third book needs to be in there before I start even attempt to do novels, if I even end up doing them. Like a lot of writers, I do this thing, and I know it's a very common thing with authors and writers, is that you have this great idea, you start on it, and you get halfway through, and you just peter out. Sometimes not even halfway through, a quarter of the way through something. So I have about a dozen novels that have been started. Now, fortunately, I've gotten a little further with this one, but it is actually based on a adventure. One of the adventures will be published in the upcoming book. So speaking of which, the third book will be a book of adventures. Um, I went back and forth on this because, again, SK is not so popular, I think, as to produce published adventures. But I feel like if I do put them out there, it may actually help. So I think it will actually kind of reverse. I think one will beget the other in the opposite way than one might originally assume. And also, it'll be probably 5 adventures, maybe 6, but I'm looking at 5 right now. And then there will be a second section and I'll probably there'll be new creatures, new monsters in there. Possibly another little mini guide about and some more NPCs and stuff about game mastering. Yeah, and then probably an errata page from the last two, because now that I go back to the two main books there, I keep finding and a lot of it's just like a couple little typos, like whatever. I don't care. Everybody knows what I mean by that sentence that misses the article, or even the verb tense might be off or something stupid, but we all know what the intent was. But then there's things like I left the scimitar stats out, which I'm still kicking myself over, from the Savages, the most iconic weapon in the east of Savage Kingdoms, and in what we think of in the zeitgeist that is Eastern style fantasy. I'm not talking about Far Eastern. I'm just talking about near Middle Eastern, or really Eastern as a generic whole. The scimitar is like your weapon. I mean, it's Conan, and it's all these Arabic adventures, and I left the stats out because I thought I didn't bother to look. I guess when I was writing the Savages, I thought I included them in the core rule book, but I did not. But there's saber stats in there. So the fix on that, by the way, until I publish the errata, is use stats for saber. Reduce the cost by 5 silver. However, scimitars are a little bit cheaper to make than a saber, and it doesn't have armor piercing 1 when you use it in 2 hands with a scimitar. So in other words, scimitar stats equals saber without the armor piercing for going 2 hands, because it's a medium weapon, and it costs 5 silver coins less. And there you go. I think that was the intended design. Had I actually included them. The other, I guess, most iconic weapon of the East, people might assume is like a katana or something, but to me, it's by far easily a scimitar, because I kind of grew up more with those kind of Conan stories with the deserts and the desert peoples and the Bedouins, and all that stuff really appeals to me. Not that the Far Eastern stuff does not, but anyway, so possibly an errata thing at the end of that. All right, we're at 24 minutes. I definitely feel like I'm rambling, but I feel like I'm also covering some things, even though it may be sporadic and back and forth and here and there and that sort of thing, so I apologize. Getting back on track to finish out the video. So yeah, next product will be the, I don't even know what the name of it will be. Will be the adventures, published adventures, probably 5 of them. The end back part will be game mastering new creatures, NPCs, probably some errata, and then that's probably the only book I would release during the year. I mean, this isn't D&D where they slap out a book every couple months. Um, just really can't afford it, and there's not really the appeal for it. And then because of the budget being so low here at Fire and Productions, um, every time I release a new book, I have to kickstart it or Indiegogo. I just do not quite have the funds to just do it without having crowdfunding. So I'll probably do that again. Speaking of which, I will very likely go back to what's it called, Kickstarter, the original one. So Indiegogo was from the last, was it just the last one? No, the last 2 books, I guess. It just didn't quite have the appeal. So people have asked, why did you go get away from Kickstarter in the first place? So interesting. So the first edition and Reforged, I used Kickstarter, and it did pretty well. But I noticed that it kept declining. And then, if I don't know, if some of you may recall, for Savage Kingdom's third edition core rule book, I started with Kickstarter, and I did a goal that I figured was the same amount we made for Reforged, and we fell fairly short. The only time I've actually failed a Kickstarter campaign, but we were fairly short. I was like, so I got a little frustrated, and also, and there was some kind of negative stuff happening with Kickstarter at the time. Anyway, I don't want to go into it, but so I was like, all right, screw that. I'll just go Indiegogo because you can keep whatever you raise. So, which is awesome. The drawback is which is why Kickstarter does it that way. You have to be really careful. Fortunately, I've done enough of these to kind of know where I need to be. But you have to be really careful because if you sure you can keep whatever, but it may not be quite enough or as much as you really wanted it to be to produce the product that you wanted. Um, and I wouldn't say this happened with SK3 because I'm extremely happy with the products, but it was very, I mean, extremely tight. I had hardly any budget left over. My only profit from it was from sales, which, I sell, just to give you some insight, I sell maybe 2 of these books a month probably, and maybe 4 or 5 PDFs, which is, not horrible for a little side thing. But yeah, that's for a normal income, that's like what, 2 days living expense or 1 day's living expense in the grand scheme of things. So all that to say that I'm just barely kind of getting by and just barely having enough margin to mail the books out to the people who bought the hardcover or the T-shirts or whatever. So speaking of which, while I'm on the subject and I don't forget, let me know if you are a Indiegogo supporter from the Savage East and you haven't received this book yet. If you were due one, if you were at the level to receive, because they all went out, but it's been 10, 11, 12 weeks ago. And they are running slow because of obviously the work shortage and COVID and holidays and all that stuff. But I think they should all be there by now. So if you are due one and it's not there, please let me know because I feel like it should have been there by now. Uh, one of my supporters, or a couple of my supporters are over. One's in Korea. Shout out to Guy, and I think there's another one in Australia. You guys may not have gotten yours yet, but I still feel like it might be there. Anyway, shoot me a note. Put a comment here or contact me some way, carrier pigeon, raven somehow, and let me know that you didn't get it, and I'll see if I can try to send another one or figure out what happened. So, all right, 29 minutes. I've kind of rambled. So, just to encapsulate what I just said and kind of bookend how I started this video, this is just to kind of see going forward with Savage Kingdom's role-playing game, in particular Firehead Productions. I think it will be fine because I can produce theater and other stuff with that, and maybe even some film eventually. But instead of separating the companies, I want to keep this. Just to me, I think things are neater just with one umbrella, which is why I have a YouTube channel that has my acting stuff on it and also game design. I may eventually separate those two. Some people have told me I should. Others said, no, you're fine because you don't really have a lot of followers. It doesn't matter. So maybe I'll just keep that the same for now. So yes, like, subscribe, please share the video. I know these are they're not fancy and flashy like everything is nowadays, but hopefully I'm, in addition to rambling, at least giving some content and maybe some minor entertainment and possibly even some knowledge about tabletop gaming, particularly Savage Kingdoms. Look for more videos as well. I'm going to try to do more of these and I don't know, I'm just going to really try to kind of ramp this up. So if you guys can help out in any way, subscribing, sharing, buying the books, let people know about this game, because I think it's really cool. And just on a quick positive note, the people that have stayed with Savage Kingdoms, which is a lot, like my core playtesters, some of the people I listed earlier, even more of them, my Savage Youth, those people love the game overall. So even though we have a very small following, it's very tight, and that's actually what inspires me to think that we have something here yet. I just think I don't have the means to kind of do a bigger brand awareness campaign or nationwide distribution, or let alone international distribution. So I think that's the thing that's kind of hurting us the most as far as brand awareness goes. But anyway, take that all to mind. Appreciate you guys sitting through 31 minutes of this kind of update. This was just kind of a shout back to 2021 and where we left off with the game system. I do have some cool Roll20 campaigns going on that I'm still running. I run a live group on here in at the Asheville area in Western North Carolina on Wednesdays. I make appearances at the local bookstores and some conventions on occasion. I think I'm going to do more of that as well for brand awareness. Even though honestly, I've noticed that's not actually as big a deal as most people might think, but still, it's cool. So yeah, I just try to stay with this thing as much as I can, as well as all my other acting and my other gigs and stuff. Weirdness is on the side. So thanks for putting up with me. Happy New Year. Let's have a great New Year going forward with 2022, and I'll talk to you guys again soon.